All right, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Hope you're all enjoying past Summit this week. In Seattle, we have lovely weather in Seattle this week, which is generally the exception. So thank you for bringing it with you. My name is Miguel Llopis, and today we're going to be talking about Data Factory in Microsoft Fabric. A quick intro, since it's the PowerPoint template we got. I'm a group product manager working on data integration. I'm a founding member of a Power Query product team. And currently, I lead the Power Query dataflows, connectors, gateways, and VNet product areas. And I'm extremely passionate. If you've ever talked to me before, you'll know I'm extremely passionate about building simple experiences that enable everyone to work with data, and doing that with magical AI-infused experiences that increase productivity and they're just delightful. And I have the pleasure to be joined today by Abhishek Narayan. Abhishek, you want to say a few words?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the conference. And I'm Abhishek. I work as a product manager in the Data Factory team. And so we're going to talk about data integration, pipelines, orchestration, a lot of those things. So let's get started.
All right. So today we're going to be covering three main blocks. First, we're going to do a little bit of an overview of Data Factory in Fabric, and also a little bit of an overview and intro to Fabric. And just so I get a good sense, how many of you have already been using Fabric? OK, quite a few. How many of you Data Factory, actually? OK, majority of you. So for those of you who haven't, we'll do a little bit of an overview, but we'll quickly move into demos. We plan to also spend quite a bit of time doing more advanced topics, a little bit of best practices as well, and tips and tricks for creating data flows and pipelines. And then towards the end, we're going to give you a view into our next 6 months roadmap for the product, and a couple of sneak peek demos, things that have not seen much outside of this room by most folks in the wild. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of interesting content from everyone, regardless of how familiar you are with the product already. Let's start with the first block, so Data Factory in Fabric. You've probably seen this slide or similar slide about 100 times this week and over the last few months. Microsoft Fabric is the forward-looking, next-generation end-to-end analytics solution built by Microsoft. And this is a complete analytics suite that provides all sorts of capabilities, from data integration to data engineering, data warehousing, data science, real-time analytics, business intelligence, of course, with Power BI. And the latest addition to this pack was a few months ago with the data activator capabilities for observability. The secret to all of this is that all of these experiences live within a single unified frame, really a suite of solutions. So that all means a single SaaS product experience, a single way to sign up for the product, a single way to get charged for the product if you actually end up making real use of it. Single security and governance model, so heavily important, right? Single compute and storage, single business model, as we were saying. And then that layer in the middle, which is a little bit less emphasized in this chart, but it's the secret sauce of Fabric, is that unified data foundation with one lake. So if you've heard about one lake, it's all about the one single copy of data for all of these workloads, all the engines running on top of the same data, single security model on top of that data layer. So it's really the one lake to rule them all. And if you haven't checked One Lake, there are a few other sessions this week to do a deep dive. Definitely encourage you to check it out. All right, so today we're going to be talking about that first box, the data integration set of capabilities that we provide with Data Factory. Now, switching specifically to Data Factory, what it is our mission. So Abhishek's, my mission, when we wake up every morning, we say, what do we want to do today? We say, we want to build the world's data integration platform for all users in every cloud. So every single word in this sentence matters. So first of all, we want to build the best possible data integration platform, but very importantly, for all users. And in my intro, I mentioned helping every user connect to data. So this, as we will see, ranges from professional data integration to citizen data integration on the other side, and trying to bring it all together. But also the second part, or the last part of the sentence, is on every cloud. We provide breadth connectivity options to over 170 different data sources. So that doesn't matter if your data is on-prem or it's in the cloud, the Azure cloud, the Amazon cloud, the Google cloud, right? Any option we provide today to connect to that data and to operate on top of that data and be able to get analytics done on top of it with seamless data integration capabilities. Now, that is kind of the highest mission statement, but we like to divide that in 4 different pillars. The first one is modern. We want to provide a modernized experience. We're leading with SaaS. SaaS, for those of you who don't know, stands for Software as a Service. So this really means easy to use, easy to sign up. We internally use the term 5 by 5. 5 seconds to sign up, 5 minutes to wow, meaning that somebody completely new to the service should be able to come on board, very quickly get started, and in just a few minutes, do something meaningful to them that kind of wows them and shows them the value of the product. So, and along those lines, not only modern and SaaS-led, but also providing that experience that ranges from low-code, no-code experiences all the way up to pro dev. The second pillar here is complete DI. Of course, we're going to provide comprehensive capabilities, both in terms of the breadth of capabilities. I was alluding earlier to the 170 plus connectors we have. It's not only about the number, but also every single one of those connectors is deeply optimized for the underlying data source we connect to. And just like that for connectivity, every other area of the product, right? Whether it is transformations, orchestration, operationalization, refresh, and on and on. The third pillar is arguably the most important one, right? Trusted data integration. How are you going to use a product if you don't trust it? Within this bucket, you can put everything that ranges from being secure and compliant, allowing IT to govern the solution, allowing organizations to curate the content that is presented to their end users in that solution, but also everything that has to do with reliability, performance, overall quality of the experience in the product. So that's trusted, right? And that's first and foremost for us. And the last bucket here, last but not least, is open. We want to build a platform more than a closed product. We want to build a platform that every ISV out there that either owns a data source or a data destination, or maybe would like to develop some data integration templates or data transformation capabilities, they should be very easy for them to actually plug those things and extend what we provide out of the box. So we're really ecosystem power and really with an eye towards OSS, open source enablement as well. This is a 10,000-foot view of the capabilities we provide with Fabric Data Factory. If we start from the left, you'd see a bunch of icons here that you may recognize as familiar. These are data sources, a sample of the data sources we support. And we support data coming in as batch, micro batch, and also through streaming solutions. And then the middle layer here is the core of a product. It allows you to do things like data ingestion, of course, data transformation, data replication. We just earlier this week announced the mirroring capabilities in Fabric, so that's also powered by technologies built by our team. And ultimately, we want to allow you to not only ingest and transform data once, but also output that data to a meaningful destination, which are the things that we have on the right here, and also orchestrate this as part of more complex logic. So a very simple orchestration could be, look, refresh my ETL once a day at 8 a.m. Pacific time. But you may do things fancier, like, for example, say, my data ingestion is coming from Salesforce. So whenever a new customer opportunity shows up in Salesforce, I want you to trigger my entire ETL pipeline. And whenever that finishes, I want you to send me an email or Teams notification, or I want you to write different outputs of this pipeline, different data outputs of this pipeline to different destinations and do subsequent processing, maybe through transformations in a notebook script, maybe through running a stored procedure, right, in SQL, maybe by chaining the execution of multiple data flows, right? The sky is the limit because we provide very advanced and comprehensive capabilities to orchestrate all of these data processes. Okay, this slide talks a little bit of stepping back and thinking about backwards looking, history of how we got here. For the last decade, I would say, maybe even longer with some of the technologies we call out here, like SQL Server integration services, we've had different efforts at Microsoft around data integration. An effort towards enabling professional users, professional developers, to handle data integration with products such as Azure Data Factory, Azure Synapse Analytics, SQL Server integration services, solutions that were really comprehensive and powerful, but also really complex. Solutions that were hard for many users to get started with, even intimidating, right? For many users who didn't have the technical skills to do, to perform those tasks with those tools, but they had the business need to do so. Now, if you look at the other extreme of this picture, we have the citizen data integration capabilities powered primarily through Power Query, and Power Query being a low-code experience to ingest and transform data, but done in the context of very specific product integrations. So Power Query deeply integrated into Excel so that business users could bring data into an Excel workbook and start doing pivot tables, doing analyzing data on the spreadsheet, right? Or Power Query integrated inside of Power BI desktop, so you could create Power BI reports and bring data in and put in the right shape to then visualize it in a report. And just like that, we integrated Power Query in many other places. The Power Platform, so you could bring data through Power Query into Dataverse to then create data-driven applications with Power Apps and automations with Power Automate. Dynamics 365 applications, we also have a few integrations there for specific workloads and experiences and product offerings within this 365. But all of that was really, yet it was very easy, it was also kind of limiting because it was kind of funneling into the specific destination for that specific product. Power Query was never a general purpose ETL solution, that would allow you to bring data from many sources into many destinations, or that was highly scalable to the point that was needed to perform many of those workloads. What are we doing with Data Factory in Fabric? We're actually trying to bring together the best of these worlds so that we create a single offering, a single solution that empowers both the pro user as well as the citizen user, that creates an end result that is as easy to use and intuitive and highly visual as Power Query has always been and continues to improve, but also as powerful as solutions like Azure Data Factory are. So bringing these two things together into a single pane of glass, a single experience that allows you to do not only ETL and ELT, and we'll talk a little bit more about the differences there, but also complex orchestration around that, and really creating a solution that is fully centered around data integration. So just like you have Power BI as a BI solution, right, a BI product, you have Data Factory as a data integration product. SaaS-based, in the cloud, really easy to get started. So that is what we're after. And as we said earlier, providing not only a solution, but the most comprehensive and powerful solution in the market for data integration. As we said, the integration for everyone, and we're going to do a bunch of demos today, so I'm going to skip this animation here. We already talked about rich connectivity as well. We support over 170 different data sources today to the main data platforms out there that you can think of. Name one, we probably have a connector, or there are ways to extend the platform. We provide a connectors SDK that allows any developer out there to create their own connectors. And we also provide a certification program for connectors so that, let's say you're somebody like SAP or Databricks or Oracle, right? And you'd like to build a connector for Power Query and for Data Factory. You can actually build a connector using our SDK and then go through our connector submission program to submit the connector for us. We'll review it and ship it to everyone on your behalf. In fact, if you go use the experience today, out of those 170 plus connectors that we support today, about 9,500 of those are actually owned by third parties and certified through us and shipped to everyone. And guess what? You probably didn't notice because they're so deeply integrated in the product that we just make it super easy to use and consume. The last point here is that we support both cloud and on-prem connectivity. The on-prem connectivity goes through the on-premises data gateways, which you probably have used already through Power BI and the Power Platform. We're extending that to the rest of Fabric. And the VNet data gateways have been a capability that allows you to connect securely within the Azure virtual networks to Power BI. We've had the preview in Power BI for data sets for the last couple of years. Just this week, we announced the same capability, the VNet capability, also for dataflows Gen 2 inside of Fabric. So now you can actually securely connect to your Azure-based data services in dataflows using your VNet data gateways as well. And as we were saying, dataflows Gen 2 is the next generation of data integration capabilities and data prep capabilities. You've probably already used dataflows in Power BI or maybe dataflows in the Power Platform today. So really think about this as the evolution of capabilities. Evolution in a couple of ways. One is about higher scale. And we'll talk a little bit more about the underlying compute capabilities, the high-scale data transformations capabilities, but also the versatility to output your data flow results to many different destinations. And today we have about a handful of them, including Azure SQL databases, data warehouses and lakehouses in Fabric, KQL or Cousteau databases, but we have many, many more coming over the next months and years. It's definitely just the beginning of a long journey ahead of us. We're going to go and do a demo of these dataflows Gen 2 capabilities, because if you know me, you'll know that I don't really like slides. I prefer real stuff and demos. The first thing I'm going to do, of course, so you see it better, is going to be go into full screen. OK, what I'm looking at right now is just the Power BI homepage. If you're wondering, how do I get started with Data Factory, check out this bottom left corner icon here for Power BI. You can actually click that. And this is going to give you access to all the different workloads and experiences we have inside of Fabric. If you don't see them here, it's probably because your organization has not turned on Fabric. That is something that your tenant admin will have to do. And you can easily find through this Microsoft Fabric link here information for how to get started and how to turn it on. And we do provide a 2-month trial. In fact, I'm running on a 59 days left trial here, as you can see. I'm going to pick Data Factory. And that is going to bring me into the Data Factory homepage. What I see in this homepage is the ability to create new artifacts. And these artifacts includes Dataflow Gen 2 for ingestion and transformation of data, data pipelines for orchestration. And I also see the ability to access recommended content. This could be either my workspace or recent artifacts, or it could be even help articles. So we have the ability to recommend different things depending on where you are in the journey. Let's go ahead and get started with a Dataflow Gen 2. I'm going to switch to the second tab where I already launched the Dataflow editor. You'd recognize the Power Query experiences here. We've modernized a little bit of this. We have now a new welcome page. So whenever you say new Dataflow, we come straight into this page, as opposed to Dataflow Gen 1, where we actually took you step by step through the get data experience. Why did we make this change? A couple of reasons. One is, I don't know if you've ever tried to copy-paste one or multiple queries from Excel or Power BI Desktop into a Dataflow. That is super easy. You just right-click on the queries pane on a query, copy, come here, do Control-V, and it pastes for you. And even more magic, if you actually had a complex mashup, let's say you have customers, orders, and top customers as a join of the two, you could just right-click on top customers, and we will take care of understanding that you actually needed to also bring customers and orders. And when you do paste, we'll actually paste 3 queries instead of 1. So that is one reason. That is a capability that's always been there. But the other one that we recently introduced is this new option here, import from a Power Query template. What does that do? You actually have the ability from Power Query in Excel or in the Power Platform side, when you work on a Dataflow, to say export as a Power Query template. And that will give you a file, a .pqt, as in Power Query template, that then you can bring in here. So if you want to fast track your creation of new Dataflows Gen 2 based on Gen 1 Dataflows, or maybe a bunch of queries you have in Excel or Power BI Desktop, you can do that really easily. Let us actually go and check out something else. We're going to go connect to data from scratch. So I'm going to go to the Get Data experience. This is the new modern Get Data experience. It showcases beautiful spinners. OK, now it works. One Lake Data Hub is one of the key enhancements of this new experience. The One Lake Data Hub allows you to find and discover and reuse data that you or your organization have connected to within Fabric. Remember that one lake layer that we were talking about earlier in the Fabric diagram. So this includes things like lake houses, data marts, warehouses, data sets, and all the capabilities and artifacts, data artifacts that you may be interested in. We also give you recommendations. So this could be things that have been endorsed or things that are highly used within your organization. But of course, we also support the ability to connect to new data sources from scratch. And here is where we have all the connectors that we were talking about earlier with a wide range of files, databases, Fabric sources like data marts, data flows, warehouses, and on, Azure services, online services, and of course, many others, right? For this demo, we're going to be connecting to OData. So I'm just going to go to the OData connector, and hopefully it's still in my clipboard, or maybe it's not, doesn't seem to be. I'm going to copy it from here. For those of you who know me, I continue using my favorite data source in the world, which is Northwind. And I'm going to go click Next to connect. I'm using anonymous authentication. It's a publicly available OData feed for Northwind data. And what we're going to look at next is the familiar Power Query Navigator or Choose Data experience, where I can actually select and preview one or more tables of data. I'm going to select orders and order details as well. And I'm going to go ahead and create. So again, if you're familiar with Power Query, this is probably like you've seen it a million times at this point. So I'm going to move a bit quicker through this. What we're going to do in this order details table is that after it finishes loading, and probably not having the best Wi-Fi day of the year, what we're going to do in this table is actually take the order details information where we have the number of units and the quantity and the price. We're going to be actually creating a line total column. So we can add a new column, do a standard, and multiply the two. And as you can see, all the 400 plus Power Query transformations, they continue to be available here. Now that I've inserted the multiplication, I'm going to go and do an aggregate. So I'm going to go do order ID, and I'm going to do a group by operation over that. And I'm going to call that the order total, which is going to be the sum of the column that we just created, which is called multiplication. Okay, and now that we have the total for each of the orders, I'm going to go back to the orders table. And in here, I have a bunch of columns. As you can see, it's kind of a wide table. So I'm going to switch to a different view we introduced a little bit ago, which is the schema view. This allows me to switch my Power Query preview from the actual data preview to the schema preview so that I can do a schema-specific operations. We even lit up a new schema tools tab with operations that already existed through the product, but we kind of brought them into a focused experience. So let's say in this case, all I want to do is just select order ID and customer ID and say remove the other columns. So I can just do that, and now that I have those two columns, I can just close the schema view and go back to the data preview. What I did, of course, through that experience is just introduce a new apply the step for removing other columns. Now let's go and join these two tables. So I'm going to use combine. Actually, to make it more fun, let me do it through the global search box, where I can actually find operations actions just by name. So I'm going to say merge queries as new. And that puts me into the merge dialog. I want to merge orders, and I'm going to select order details as the other table. Here's another feature we introduced recently. Look at this light bulb here on the top right corner with a 1. This means that there's some suggested operation for me. Of course, this is a very simple case because I only have a couple of columns per table. But what this is doing is actually suggesting me what are the best column pairs to match. In this case, it's recommending me to match the order ID column from both tables. So this may seem very, very simple, but it gives you a hint of the type of experiences that we're planning to enable going forward even more and more, such as recommended defaults, smart defaults, suggestions for how to match your data better, how to clean your data better. What do we think is the next best step for you in your data? Maybe you need to pivot or unpivot, right? So we want to give you experiences that make that simple for you. I'm going to go and click OK now, and that will actually apply my merge operation. And then I'm going to go expand the order total column. OK, now that I've done a couple of things here, including transforms and a join with a third query, let me go ahead and turn on the diagram view, which I can do through the view tab, so I get a better sense for what's going on. In case you don't know the diagram view, it's probably going to become one of your favorite features as long as you have 2 or 3 queries in your data flows, because it will really easily allow you to just see and understand what's going on. Not only at the query dependencies level, like in this case, just understanding the join operation between the two, but also on a step-by-step basis. And I can, at a glance, see all the steps across all of my queries. In fact, I do have ways to even expand them all to just see my entire data flow, apply the steps across the board. OK, let's do something else now. I'm going to bring another source of data. And this is actually going to be a text file, customers.txt, which is sitting in my local disk. I could connect to it live using an on-premises data gateway if I wanted to keep an ongoing refresh against that local data. But I can also do something much more simple for a one-time import, which is drag and drop my file into the Power Query editor, into the Dataflow editor, and that will take care of actually uploading the file for me to my OneDrive documents library, so that if in the future I want to overwrite that file or I want to go and make manual edits, it's now being hooked up in a way that I can continue refreshing that with the latest data. So I'll just click Next, and from here on is just a classic text import experience inside of the Power Query Get Data UI. In this case, as we're going to see, the file is not really that nicely formatted. It's just a bunch of lines with things like company names, contact titles, phone numbers, customer ID or company ID, right? And then divider lines. And each block of these 5 lines is a different customer. So conceptually, everything, each of these blocks is a row of data, but of course they've been formatted much differently. If I were to import this just right now and say create, this is going to create a 1-column table that is, completely meaningless to me. To massage this data, I can go and use the add table using examples experience and start providing the sample values of what I would like to extract from here. So for example, this first column I could make is the company name. And the second example I provide would just allow me to provide that pattern to the tool. And then I can do the contact as the second column. This one is going to be Maria Anders. And notice in this case, with just one example in that second column, everything else was lit up. At this point, we understand the repetition pattern of these text files. So 2 examples on the first column, 1 example on the second one. From here on, I can just do something like the contact title. This is going to be sales representative. And again, with just 1 example, it comes through. And let's just do one more for the ID, because I'm going to need that for what I'm going to show you next. And again, with just 1 example, we're just able to infer the content. Now let's just go and click Create. That is going to land our query into the query editor and look at the number of steps that we added. Let me actually collapse all queries. We added 12 steps here. And if I open the apply the steps, you see everything that the AI underneath did for me based on my sample values. This is all refreshable, right? This is not a one-time import, but I can continue bringing data from the same file with the same apply the steps. It would have been really tedious to do this through the experience. Let's actually do a couple more things on this file or on this table. The first one is the formatting of the contact and title columns. Let's say I wanted to do something much more custom here. I would like to do something like the last name, uppercase, comma, the first name, and then the contact title in parentheses and uppercase. So having to do that one by one step would be really complex as well. Let us apply the same column from examples experience that you saw with the text data extraction to actually create that sample or custom column here. I'm going to do Anders Maria sales representative. And we can do the second example here, which is Trujillo Ana. And of course, the hardest part of these demos is to not make any typos. But I think I typed it correctly. So with just those 2 examples, again, we're able to infer all the other values. And I'm going to call this just display name. And we'll commit the operation. Okay, so now that we have nicely formatted customer names and we have the IDs, let us go and do a final join with the other merge table that we did earlier that has the sales information. Let me actually go back to the merge table. Before that, let's do actually a group by on customer ID. I forgot doing that earlier. And we're going to group by the customer ID, and this is going to be total sales. And we're going to do a sum of the order total column. So we're going to calculate total sales per customer. OK, now that we have that, we're ready to go and do our merge. I'm going to combine again as new queries. And I'm going to do customers, joining by customer ID and ID. Okay, and this is going to give me the information, the customers table, along with, and of course I picked the wrong, my bad, I picked the wrong order here. I want to do customers 2 first, and then do the merge. So I'm going to pick ID on both sides. That's going to give me all the information from the left table with the customer's info, and then the results of the join with just the total sales by customer. Now that I have these, I'm going to go and do just one final transform and then show you how I can output my data. The last transforms that I want to do is I'm going to add a new column to rank these customers. So I can go select the total sales column and click rank column. Another transformation, new transformation we introduced rather, a few months ago. And that actually gives us a new column with the rank, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, for each of these customers, and reorders the table. OK, so now what I would like to do, I have 29 rows on this table. I would like to output my top 10 customers to a lakehouse, and my worst 10 customers to a different lakehouse. Let's go and do that. The first thing I can do is actually reference this table, which is my base result. And I'm going to now do a transform to just keep the top 10 rows now that they've been sorted. And I'm going to call these top customers. OK, so now that I have my top customers, I'm ready to configure my output destination. I can do that in a few different ways. I have this icon here in the diagram view for adding a data destination. And I also have that in the ribbon on the Home tab so that I can add my data destination. The data destinations that we provide today, as we were saying, include Azure SQL Database, Lakehouses, Custo, Synapse Analytics, or Fabric warehouses. Let us go and do a Lakehouse. And this is going to automatically sign me into Fabric, again, into the workspace view for my lakehouses. And it's going to allow me to pick a lakehouse across all of my Fabric workspaces to pick as the destination. OK, so here I am on my Data Factory demo workspace. I'm going to pick Customer Analytics. And I have the option of either loading as a new table, create a new table for my results, or continue adding data to an existing table in the lakehouse. In this case, we're just going to do a new table. I'm going to call that Top Customers 1. And the next thing I need to pick is the mapping of my columns in the output of my query in the data flow with the destination columns that get created in the lakehouse. So this includes things like picking and excluding columns if I wanted to, but also controlling the data source in the destination as well. And the other thing that I can do here is this upper section on the update method. So we try to make it very easy to understand through visuals. So let's say on subsequent refresh, not the first refresh of my data, but subsequent ones, let's say that I had 2 rows of data already in the lakehouse destination, and the new data includes 1 new row coming from the data flow. What do I want to do with the result? Do I want to end up with 3 rows, so 2 from the earlier refreshes and 1 from the new refresh? Or do I want to fully replace the contents in the destination table in the lakehouse? So I get to pick the update method and strategy. I'm going to actually pick replace in this case. And the other thing I need to do is there's some unsupported characters here. So we recently added a feature that allows me to just fix it in 1 click. Fix it will just take care of renaming my column to a proper name. Now that I've configured that, I should be all set and ready to go and to run my data flow. And you see now how the data destination lakehouse is showing up in the diagram view, but also here on the query settings pane with all the details that have been configured. From here, I could just publish my data flow and run it. And then from there on, just automate it and make it refresh on a schedule. With that, I'm going to Alt-Tab. I think this was a good overview. Wanted to show a couple more concepts before we move into a pipelines demo. The first one is the high scalability. Something that I did actually, let me Alt-Tab again. Forgot to mention this one. You'd notice different icons here on each of my queries. Some of them look like just tables. Some of them are tables with a Thunderbolt, especially those that reference other upstream tables and end up doing transformations. What the Thunderbolt means is that we're actually leveraging the Fabric compute underneath to perform those transformations at high scale. So in this initial case with merge, we brought in order details and orders, staged them into the one lake to just perform transformations on top. And we did that merge operation as a join in SQL, in the Fabric Warehouse SQL engine. So this allows us to provide high-scale data transformation capabilities without you having to think about it too much. You do have, of course, the option to disable that staging. By default, it's enabled, and there's good reasons for that being the default. Let me show you a diagram of what that architectural choice really looks like. What you see here is the different modes of executing a data flow. We have data sources on the left. You bring that data in through the mashup engine. This is the underlying M engine in Power Query that allows you to ingest some data. Now you have the option of doing that on the fly without any sort of staging to perform some transformations and data movement, and then ingest the data into a data destination. Or the default option, which is you just automatically stage data in the staging and storage in the lakehouse, and then additional compute and transformations are performed on that warehouse engine. And from there, we load data into the data destination. So this bottom path is the default in the product, and it is what we did in the demo, which didn't, we didn't really think through it, didn't have to, provide any input selections for that, but we did the smart thing in terms of setting us up for a scale. Okay, with that, and we'll talk a little bit more about upcoming capabilities in a few minutes, but we're going to do a deep dive into data pipelines and best practices. Abhishek, all yours. Yes, question. Do you have masking capabilities? We have masking. Great question. Do we have masking data transformation capabilities inside of Power Query? The answer is twofold. No out-of-the-box masking transformation for data, but to the earlier point about extensibility and providing a platform that ISVs can plug into, easy for you to develop your own masking data transformations. And also an area that we've partnered with ISVs out there. One that I think we recently highlighted, and Abhishek maybe knows more about this, is Delphix. Delphix is an ISV company out there developing masking algorithms. They've built Power Query algorithms to mask your data, and they're redistributing those and making it easy for you to plug them in. Got it. Yeah, the feedback is in mapping data flows, there are masking capabilities today. Yeah, we ultimately want to subsume all the capabilities. So yeah, we'll likely end up doing things around those lines. Abhishek?
Yep. We'll take another question.
Okay, let's take one.
Yeah, just a quick one. Is there any billing implications for if you're utilizing, I forget what we call it, the Fabric Compute Engine to help out with queries where you have a license? What does that cost?
Great question. The question is, are there billing implications around the use of high-scale data transformations? Yes. Last week, we published a deep dive article into our Data Factory docs. I'll have a link towards the end of the session that is all about pricing and the business model. For data flows in particular, there are two different billing meters. One is what we call the standard compute. So that's all the compute utilization that you do through the Power Query M engine. So this is the data ingestion and the transformation on the fly. Additionally, there is the high-scale data transformation meter that is particular about the use of data warehouse compute.
Awesome. Let's start with data pipelines. So what we saw till now is how do you go about wrangle the data, prep the data, transform the data using Power Query Dataflow Gen 2. And that was super simple. Now let's go about how do we operationalize things, which is kind of the next step. Once you have defined what kind of data, what's the shape of the data that you expect, how do I go about operationalizing it, run it every hour, incrementally refresh it? All those patterns and practices, what we'll talk about implementing with data pipelines. And data pipelines also has the capability of kind of loading or ingesting data at scale. So we'll talk about that as well. And so with this, let's get into the demo. I just keep the slides as placeholders. So it has some PNGs and stuff, but we'll go through some live demos. And if you have any questions, do let me know in between. And with this is Data Factory Home in Fabric. All of you can sign up for a free trial. In case if you already don't have an account. And once you get there, you can see the switcher at the bottom. Click on Data Factory. It gets you to the home. Before I get started, how many of us over here have used Azure Data Factory before? Quite a few. OK, so what I'll try and do is I'll try and compare Azure Data Factory experiences with the new modernized experiences here. And we can take the questions later on. So let's get started. So what we saw till now is the Dataflow Gen 2 that gives you beautiful transformation engine. You can visually, interactively build those transformations, joins, and so on. The next thing is how do you operationalize those or ingest data? For example, if you're building an ELT pipeline, extract and load, and then you want to do a transformation using the SQL engine in data warehouse or on Spark, you would probably want to do a breakdown of that whole architecture. And so we'll get to patterns and practices. So let's start with data pipelines first. This is how I create a new data pipeline, give it a meaningful name. I just kept it like the default name. And then it gets you can start from either a template. This is very similar to what you have in ADF and Synapse. You can choose from an existing template, and over time we'll be improving and adding more and more templates into this. And so it gives you certain patterns of data ingestion or data orchestration, which you can easily get started with. You don't have to kind of build those pipelines all. It comes out of the box. For example, if you want to copy new files based on last modified time from a storage account, you don't have to kind of build a pipeline, add a logic in there, say filter files by this time and so on. So these are some pre-canned templates which helps you very easily ingest data at scale using pipelines. And I'm not going to use them because it'll be too easy if I do so. So let's get started with, if you were to build everything from scratch, in ADF and Synapse, we have something called Copy Data Tool, and we have something here called Copy Assistant. You can click on this. The good thing that we did in Fabric, or the difference is, you have a lot of sample data sets to play with, especially when you're getting started with the tool. We heard your feedback is it's slightly difficult to get started with ADF and Synapse. You have to get your own connections. Connection supports only SPNs, and service authentications or access keys. And these are not something when many enterprises prefer, right? They want OAuth because the whole RBAC mechanism from Azure AD flows in through your data sources, and users who have access to those data can access those using their own user auth. So those were the feedback, and what we did is we added sample data here, so you can play with sample data. You can provide feedback if you want to see more sample data. I know there's a lot of OData sources, there's a lot of open data sets that you can use, but these kind of gets you quick started with data pipelines. So in this case, let's use NYC Taxi. Before I actually use one of the sample data sets, I also want to show you the existing connections and the improvements we did. Let's use, for example, an Azure SQL database here, source connection. I can create a new one. Praying to the demo gods. OK, it seems to be working. So I'm going to pull up one of my SQL servers, and this is something which I never got in ADF and Synapse. So that's a functionality of Fabric. So I'm going to copy this, connect to this SQL server, and you might kind of ask at this point in time, why isn't there a drop-down? Why can't I choose this, because I already have an Azure subscription, why can't I choose that? Those are the things probably we'll talk about in roadmap. But for now, I'll use this, and I'm going to copy the database as well, bring it down here, and I would switch to organizational account. This was the missing piece. Create a new connection, and it gives me a button to sign in. And I know this has been there in Power Query for years, but for an ADF and Synapse customer, this wasn't there. And this is beautiful because if you have been granted permissions in your data warehouse or in a database based on your AAD credentials, you are basically using that. So it's kind of a see-through, pass-through, whatever you want to call it, as security teams are happy with it. And then kind of it makes it super easy for a data engineer to work with this. And once you do that, you can click on Next, uses that OAuth organizational account, and now you can see all the tables. Now imagine SQL has row-level encryptions. All of these functionalities works based on user auth, right? So if you have user auth now, like imagine you have hundreds of tables with millions of records in it, and if you don't want to show a particular record or set of records or set of columns to a particular user, you can apply those conditions or RBAC rules on the database, and we're going to honor that now because we're using the same token. So those are the features or functionalities that you get out of the box. Due to that, you can select multiple tables. Everything else is what you got in ADF and Synapse. So I'm not going to run through this whole thing and create this, but If you were to do that, you would choose a destination. Super easy to choose a destination here as well. Supports OAuth again. You can choose lake houses, data warehouses, Gusto. All these are Fabric-specific destinations, and you can choose those as well. And once you choose that, let's use a lake house. Next. Use an existing lake house, Contoso. Next. I can load it to an existing table. I can load it to a new table. I can do the column mappings. I can even define partitions. And this is extremely important when you're talking about like productizing something. And when you're talking about delta, deltas basically are nothing but files written on your file systems with certain logs. And so it's extremely important that there is partitioning in place. If you don't do the right partitioning, what would happen is the downstream consumption of those data from your Parquet files would be extremely slow. And so partition is extremely important. Could be by date time column that you have. Like, for example, you're loading records from every day. So I would probably want to set that partitioning as date time column. What it would do is imagine that every day's data on that timestamp is going to inject into a single folder with all the different files. So that gives you scale, because now if you're writing a query while building a PBI report, if you do a filter, it's going to use the partition and read the files rather than reading the whole set of data set size. So that feature is available. You can use that. This is just 4 columns, so I don't want to probably use that. And then click on OK. So it gets you a pipeline to load data, ingest data at scale. And you can see through certain properties here for scale. Again, talking about best practices, you have these settings around intelligent throughput optimization. This is what we used to call it as DIU, data integration units in ADF and Synapse. And you can use a custom value like 64, 256 that you used to do, or you can simply choose between these options, standard, balanced, maximum. And our engine will try to kind of use the maximum throughput that it could get to kind of load the data. And this is extremely helpful, especially when you're loading data from S3 into Lakehouse, or file storage into Lakehouse. We can actually do parallel load, just like how Spark does. So that gives you that benefit when you choose maximum here. Now, a few other things I want to talk about is degree of copy parallelism. Think of it as threads on a single machine. So while the above intelligent throughput gets us multiple machines or multiple nodes or multiple containers, we can still get through multiple threads within those containers. So it's kind of like a pro control, I would say. But a very, very useful control, especially when you're doing performance tuning. You can play around with degree of copy parallelism. Why do I keep losing the screen? Let me just kind of switch it to the other side. And then we'll talk about some fault tolerance mechanisms. Like when you're ingesting data, it's quite common that at times there are incompatible rows in the destination you're loading. Like something which is supported in Oracle may not be supported in Synapse Data Warehouse, and so on. So it's going to be a problem if you're building an operationalized pipeline which is going to run at midnight and it's going to fail all the time because it couldn't ingest a particular row data or a column data which was not supported by the destination. You can have schema drifts over time when you're loading and things like that. So data shape can change from your source, and hence it is important to have more reliable ingestion systems. So what you can do is you can do skip incompatible rows, and this would make sure that those rows which are causing the failure are actually not inserted. Now that could be a problem because you don't have the real data then. So we have other features like enable logging. You can actually log those rows which were skipped, right? And you can actually review that later during the morning when you get back to office. See, these were kind of leaves you an audit trail of those records which were not inserted and what was the reason for it not being reinserted. So you can kind of output those logs as well. Staging, not so useful in this case, but when you're loading data into a warehouse, you can use staging. That could actually end up using warehouse's compute to kind of ingest the data. That gives you better performance. So that's kind of quickly running through the copy, the performance tuning, best practices. Let's now look into more real-world ingestion pipeline. So And I'll try and explain this, what it is doing. It can look complex. In pipelines, you can have these green arrows, and you can also add red arrows. What it means is for each activity that you're running, it could be a data flow job, it could be a copy job, it can have different states. It could fail, it could succeed, sometimes it could be skipped as well. For example, a downstream activity skips when the previous activity fails, right? Because nothing gets executed after the failure. So you have different states, and you can hook other activities based on that. So it gives you a very nice, like imagine if you were to write code and you're doing conditionals, you're doing if, you're doing for eaches, if this, then that. You're able to kind of define that whole workflow using the visual UI here. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm trying to load incremental data. This is a real world challenge that we all face, is my data keeps refreshing once in a day, or every second or every minute. And then I want to build a data pipeline. What it does is it only loads the incremental data from the last time. Like last time I loaded 10 rows yesterday, and then after that there's 4 more records got added, and I want to only load those 4 records. And I'm using these numbers because this is an example. In real world, it will be 400 million rows, and you don't want to be loading the whole data set every day on a daily basis. So you kind of do the diff or differential or delta. And so this is what that pipeline is doing. So pipeline kind of gives you a canvas, and you can build really, really complex workflows. In this example, a few basic things. I start with parameters. Parameters are extremely important if you're building dynamic pipelines, if you're building pipelines which you want to reuse further, and I'll show you how I'm doing that reuse later on. Now, this pipeline, or the whole idea of this pipeline, reusability, is I can very easily switch the table names. I can very easily switch my control table. Control table is where I'm kind of storing what did I load last, what was the timestamp. Yep. So this is truly like an authoring canvas. Parameters, when I say here, it could be literally anything in terms of ADF. In my case, what I'm doing is I'm using table name, data source table name. Is it too small? OK. Data source table name is my parameter, and I'm using a default value here, employee table, right? And I'll show you in a bit what that employee table contains, and we'll update that employee table, and we'll run this pipeline to do a delta load, right? That's one of those parameters. The other one is I have a watermark column. Watermark column is basically a control table where I'm saying that every time when I load the data, I am hitting a stored procedure over here. You see that? Update watermark. What it does is it basically fires a stored procedure, which is in the database, of course. You don't see the code here. But what it does is to this particular thing, I'm passing certain expressions. That includes I'm passing the table name to this particular stored procedure, and I'm passing a last watermark value. That's also a parameter. So this kind of tells it that this is my last watermark. This is the query I ran. This is the last, like the query. I'll show you the query is basically, it goes from this time to that time. It can use any column. It could use a datetime column, or it could use any int column, which is unique. And so you can run a query between that, and it loads that. So it basically takes the other side of the data till where you loaded from, let's say, 1 to 5. So it takes that 5 value, makes that watermark, and passes it stored procedure with the table name. So what you see in the control table is basically a name of a table and what was the last watermark. It could be a date time based on what column you choose for watermarking, or it could be a unique, data, an integer column. Yep.
So are you able to compare those 4 new rows to destination table to see, okay, these records already existing, so therefore load or not load? Do you have that flexibility, or do you have to write a stored procedure to do that for you?
I'll show you. I'm doing a lookup for that purpose here. So like right till now, what we talked about is an initial lookup for getting my watermark, and I'll show you the queries what I'm doing here. So it's basically doing a select, and these are, the moment you see that at thingy, that is basically when you are kind of using a parameter in there. Yep.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting. Just for my understanding, so a parameter could be a collection of rows, for example. Is that a possibility?
So this is all control parameters, I would say, at this point in time. But if you're returning certain values, which I would not recommend, and I will tell you why I don't recommend, because for orchestration, we do have limits of 4 MB. So we don't suggest you to kind of use this as a data flow. I would recommend you to use a data flow Gen 2 instead of doing that, right? This is just for control data orchestration.
Okay.
Question over there.
So when you talk about pulling in your deltas and you're looking at your last modified, I've heard you reference potentially some sort of control table. So are we looking at the monitor and are we ensuring that it's the last time that the pipeline was successful? Or are we able to say, for those things, can we look at both what's coming up in monitor as the last time the pipeline ran, or are we expected to create a sort of prop and pull that in, the last modified data from a control table based on storing it locally?
Sure. And I'll tell you what customers do, right? There are multiple patterns you can build. You don't probably need a control table. In fact, we are working on another thing which we'll talk about roadback, which is change data capture based incremental loads. You don't need any of these over there, right? This is a pattern which is well established in data engineering. And so I'm showing that. Yes, it's complex. You need stored procedure to update that. But it's a lot of value to maintain a control table outside of your system. And the reason for that is, what if your system goes down? What if there's a BCDR requirement? What if there's a migration that you need to do? And things like that. So having that control table and being able to update those control tables yourself outside of the system gives you a much bigger control versus when you are doing things internally. For example, I'll give you an example of real-world scenario. If there's a downtime, if the system is down, like let's say if Azure is down for a certain time, and you have to recover those runs, you have to do those runs manually. At times, what you can do is, or later on, when you figure out that there was a bad data that was provided by someone, a partner, and you want to rectify that, how am I going to do that? So with control table, the benefits is you can always update play with the control table, and then rerun those pipelines, and it's agnostic to the pipeline. So when you run the pipeline, pipelines are like idempotent. That's a very important term in data engineering, right? So if you build any jobs which are idempotent, you don't have to worry about the pipeline, the state of the pipeline, how you fetch the states, because you're using a metadata and you're driving your whole pipelines and ingestion using that metadata. And the only thing you need to control is that metadata. If you wanted to reload those values, I'm just going to change that last value to, from 10 to 5, and it's going to reload those 5 rows for me, right? So the whole management, cleansing, reloading of data is much simpler if you do it completely on a metadata table. Not the fact, I'm not saying it's easy to build, but it gives you full control versus if you use just pipelines and just specify last modified time. We do give you that option as well. That's an easier option to load, but rerun could be challenging because we are not keeping the state of it.
What are you using as your SQL database? You've got an Azure SQL database that metadata store?
In this case, yes. I'll show you that. So let's get to that. So I'll just kind of pause on the questions for now. This is kind of a query that I'm running to kind of start with, tell me what was the last watermark value that you had. And let's quickly check on the more important stuff, which is my metadata table. So in fact, I'll check the metadata table as well, but this is more importantly my actual data table. This is the employee table, and this is the employee table which I was using in my parameter to kind of load the values. And I can quickly run this, and I have 8 records in it. And my metadata table probably has, I think I last ran this pipeline, so I'm going to show you the output of that pipeline. You can click on View Run History. Damn, it started failing. Don't worry, we'll try and fix it. Let me run this pipeline. So this is parameters. When you run a pipeline, you get an opportunity to overload those parameters at this point in time. If you're running through an API, you can do that. If you're running through third-party things, tools, schedulers, you can do that as well. So let's run this. So I'm using employee table, creating a destination container called EMP. If I want to switch that, dynamically create new containers, I can do that using this. I have to give a watermark table as well. Click on OK. run this pipeline. It starts with my lookup to fetch the current watermark, the last watermark, and then using those two values, it generates a SQL query to load the data, the incremental data. And each of these status can be verified. You can actually look into input and output. You will see, output kind of returns you the watermark value that it had. In my table, it was 8. And once it gets both these activities, because you have a condition, this and this, and then on success of both, it runs the copy job. So once both are successful, it will trigger the copy job with the dynamic query. We'll see what the dynamic query is. And the expectation is that this time, both my watermark, not a good omen. A lookup cannot take that long. Let's cancel this and rerun this. And this is what I was talking about, idempotency, right? It doesn't matter. It's not going to load any, like any point in time when I cancel the pipeline and rerun that, it should not have multiple records. It should not pollute my source or destination. So that is the idempotency we have to build in our pipelines. So let's give it a try again, running this. OK, this time it was fun, 13 seconds. And if you see, it got the watermark value for 8, which was last watermark, and the current watermark should be 8 as well. So when it runs a query, it loads no records from 8 to 8. And so my copy, which has also succeeded, would show you it copied 0 thing in it. But it succeeded, of course, because it succeeded. It's just that the query did not have any return value in it. Now, let's do a quick update to our data. This is my employee table. So it has watermark as 8. So it has 8 as the value. Run that. Doesn't seem to be hitting run. Oh, it times out? Gosh. This is a client IP problem. I don't think I can fix the firewall right now. OK. OK. So then I can only tell you is if I were to update those records right now, at any point in time and increase the watermark value, then my lookup will return the updated watermark value, which I'm not able to update using this. I just did that while Miguel was doing, but I don't know why it changed here. So I'll try and fix this again while you take over the stage and talk about roadmap. And I'll make sure we continue from here towards the end, so maybe last couple of minutes. Yep. Before I switch over and we get to the roadmap, I also want to talk about other transformation, because ADF is an orchestration tool, and you can write notebooks, you can write SQL scripts, and you can orchestrate all of them. So, and then with patterns and practices, what people do with ADF is it's a good idea to work, like imagine if you're doing unit testing. You start with a single pipeline for a certain need, for example, data ingestion, right? You build that pipeline, you test that by itself, then you build a transformation, cleansing, prepping, all the different processes that you want to run, you can do it in steps. And so you can do it in different pipelines. In this case, I have transform to Silver. I have transformed to Silver Notebook, which orchestrates through the pipeline. And then I have a cleansing pipeline as well, which basically uses a data flow. And each of these steps are notifying me or sending me a notification whenever something happened. And so through the activities that we have, these were things which were not there in ADF, like email activity for Office 365 Outlook, Teams activity. You can actually notify, you can send the output of an activity, you can send all the expressions that you're generating from the activity out to this through emails or Teams as well. So that's something new we added. Now, if you're building more complex pipelines, typically this is what customers do in patterns and practices, is they would start with a main pipeline, which they know my job is to load the sales data, transform that data, and then kind of make it consumable by reports, right? So I'll start with a P main. I can say _sales as well. And then I'll start stitching all the different components I've built all through this, like incremental load, right? Which is a generic pipeline. It can be used by sales. It can be used by finance. It can be used by any team. And so I would start adding activities like invoke pipeline and click on those pipelines that I have built. So maybe create a few copies of it, do some connections like this, and I can start invoking pipelines for different jobs that I had. In this case, ingest data. In this case, transform or cleanse. In this case, load to gold or something, right? And I can choose the different pipelines that I've created before. For example, we had P-cleanse or ingestion bronze, and so on. So this way, you basically get And so this is how you build pipelines, because this is now way more like you can do unit testing for each of those pipelines, and you can have an Uber pipeline, which makes it super easy to stitch things together and monitor things as a whole, right? Versus kind of going into 10 different places. So I think with this, we'll switch back. Good. Talk about roadmap quickly. We'll cover that in roadmap. We are fixing that. That is right. We already have 90+ parity right now, but we have added more activities which were not there in ADF. So in true sense, like it covers everything and more.
All right, so we have about 7 minutes left. Let's take a look at roadmap. Thanks, Abhishek, for a great demo. This is a little bit of a recap of all the product improvements we've made over the last 6 months. If you recall, back in late May at the Build conference, we announced the public preview of Fabric and Data Factory as part of that. So we've made a lot of improvements so far. Thank you in big ways to your feedback and many other customers' feedback. We have many more things ahead of us, right? Just this week, we announced general availability for Fabric and Data Factory as part of that. And alongside that, we included some major updates, such as the modern data experience that you saw in both the data flows and the pipelines demos, the 90% parity with ADF for data pipeline orchestration activities that Abhishek was alluding to. We also improved the capabilities around data flows Gen 2 with the Fabric warehouse compute that we showed you in the data flows demo. We also announced the Azure Data Factory right to the One Lake and Lakehouse capabilities as a sync within copy in Azure Data Factory. And we also announced a gated public preview of Copilot for Data Factory, particularly around the data flow Copilot capabilities. Let us take a look at that. I don't know if you've got a chance to see it. We just announced that yesterday, and I know you're all on a conference, so maybe didn't see this part.
Only Fabric. Copilot is Fabric only.
Right, it's Fabric only. Let us watch a demo.
Welcome to this overview of Copilot for Data Factory in Microsoft Fabric. In this video, we'll explore how to enhance your creativity and productivity when authoring Gen 2 data flows. To begin, we'll use the Get Data experience, where we can search for existing connections via OneLake Data Hub or use any of the hundreds of connectors available today within Data Factory. After connecting to our source, we can browse available tables, views, and more to bring in the data that we need. Next, we'll use a starter prompt to gain insight into our query and any applied steps. For instance, in this example, we've learned that the source is Northwind and the rows have been limited to customers in the USA. Since we want to focus on orders and their details in this customer region, we will first join the two order tables together into a new query. A term like join, which is titled merge within Power Query, is easily able to be inferred. Now we'll limit our rows to only those where the ship region is in the USA to ensure consistency with our customers table. In the Copilot pane, the visual cues and titles on the cards, such as filter rows, are designed to help new or inexperienced users understand the keywords they can type or the buttons to click. After scrolling through and inspecting data in the data preview grid, we want to focus on the shipper name and regions and their total quantities. This results in a group by operation now being applied in a total sum of our quantity column. We'll now change the region name to abbreviation using a text input and then update the query title in the visual diagram view. This ensures an augmented experience where simple tasks like renaming objects can still be accomplished with ease and based on the user's preference. Leveraging the power of Azure OpenAI, we can create a new query with state names, abbreviations, and Federal Information Processing Standard state codes. In the past, this would have required us to open a new browser tab, search for a website with the supported HTML table, create a new query with the web connector, and then apply necessary transformations. But now all of this can be achieved with a text input, increasing the author's overall productivity. Continuing to enrich our data, we'll join the FIPS table and the US orders table together into a new query. We can further shape our table by asking it to move column positions and perform tasks like updating all column headers to a more readable format by adding spaces with a single input. For many, updating column headers is a tedious task that must be performed one at a time, but is now possible in just a few words. And in this last example, Copilot will assist in creating a rich calendar table for us by applying over 20 steps. In the past, this would have required numerous clicks, but with Copilot for Data Factory and Microsoft Fabric, it's done with just a few words. We hope you've enjoyed this overview of how Copilot for Data Factory can be leveraged as an AI-powered intelligent assistant that helps you focus on the task at hand and accomplishing complex tasks with ease. Welcome to the
All right, so that was just a little overview of the capabilities that we've announced this week. They're available as a gated public preview. You can go to the Fabric blog and find the GA announcement where we have a link for how to sign up for Copilot across Fabric. But of course, that is only the beginning of the road, and we have many more things we can and would like to do in terms of new skills for Copilot, not only on dataflows, but also for pipeline capabilities. Besides Copilot, there's also many things we're doing in the first half of 2024. We mentioned earlier that we also this week announced the BNet Data Gateway support for dataflows Gen 2 in Fabric. We're going to get that through full preview NGA cycle and also improve the capabilities. Another very requested feature within dataflows is the ability to perform incremental refresh, and that is also coming over the next few months. And there's also many more capabilities, such as the ability to save as or duplicate data flows, save with a different name. Fast copy is a capability that will bring together the power of the pipeline's copy activities for massive scale data ingestion with the data flow, get data, and transformation capabilities. We're going to show you a demo of that. But before we go there, a few other key requests from many of you. CI/CD capabilities for source control integration within pipeline, event triggers, access to on-premises data from pipelines using the on-premises data gateway, the same on-premises data gateway that you're already using with data flows. And of course, many other capabilities, Airflow, DBT, enhancements to our end-to-end parameterization support across pipelines and data flows, managed identity, Azure Key Vault, Secrets Vault support, and many, many more capabilities. We are right on time, but wanted to leave a video up. One more thing here, the link at the bottom is actually where you can find our full roadmap. And with that, let us actually go into a final demo. This is dataflows fast copy.
Hey everyone, in this demo I will be showing some tips and tricks on how you can leverage new capabilities like fast copy to make your dataflow Gen 2 more performant. Let's take this example where a customer already has an existing dataflow Gen 2 that is processing 22 gigabytes of data. The refresh takes almost 2 hours to complete. Let me show you how you can leverage fast copy and some query optimization techniques to improve this refresh time. First, I'll allow the use of fast copy connectors. This will leverage the powerful copy activity from pipelines to copy my data into the Fabric One Lake. For my more complex data transformations, I want to leverage the Fabric compute. To leverage this, I have to stage my data first into the Fabric One Lake. This is easy. All I have to do is enable staging and reference my query. Now I can start applying all my complex transformations and compute those transformations at scale. In this example, I will be reapplying the exact same step as I previously had. This will be a group by that takes a lot of compute to calculate. Lastly, since I split my query into two, I need to reapply my data destination. I am picking the same lakehouse again. All I have to do is just pick the lakehouse from the navigator, create a new table, and I'm going to use append as my update method. Then I will publish my data flow. And if you open the refresh history, you can now see that it only took 10 minutes to process the exact same 22 gigabytes of data with the exact same transformation as before. But now it does it much, much, much faster. Thank you everyone for watching this demo.
All right, so pretty exciting upcoming capabilities. Again, the takeaway I want you to take from this session is we're bringing together the best of data integration across the Microsoft product portfolio you've been used to for the last decade. We're bringing together the ease of use and simplicity of a Power Query experiences with a high scale of Azure Data Factory into a single SaaS-based solution that we want to grow and make it become the world's best data integration platform available in the market. With that, these are a few links for how to get started with Fabric and Docs and Ideas Forum. We'll take questions in a minute. Before that, remember to please fill your session evaluations. And with that, I think you have a question?
Yeah, my question is, what will be the path for migrating and giving investments in pipelines that we have done for systems, loading systems, big data pool? So how the migration will go to the public of that part, because it's pretty clear how to migrate the data warehouse with the structure and tables and stuff. But what about the pipeline?
Great question. The question is, what's the path to migration from existing Azure Data Factory investments to Data Factory in Fabric? A couple of answers there. One is we're working on best practices and documentation for how to provide that upgrade pathway for you coming from Azure Data Factory. Activity parity and data source parity also, of course, is part of the equation here. So we are in parallel working on bringing those capabilities into the product for just general support within pipelines in Fabric. But also we're looking at ways to allow you to mount your existing ADF factories into Fabric. And we didn't get to show you that today because we're still evolving those capabilities, but you can expect more news on that on the first few months within 2024. Will that include Synapse pipelines? Yes, both for Azure Data Factory and Synapse pipelines, we're trying to provide a common upgrade path. Yeah, stay tuned, there will be more on that. With that, thank you all for coming.
Thank you all.